Knowledge in the Wind is the name of a project that brings research in the humanities and the social sciences to the sea. In May 2018, we sailed on the Cutter Claronia, which is a 80-meter sailboat in the Mediterranean from Rome to the Pontine Islands, Ponza and then Ventotene, and then back to the mainland. We wanted to test a concept, the concept of a humanities sailboat, a humanities living lab. There are many sailing labs, but they're typically doing research on biological and physical sciences. So they collect plankton, they measure winds, they measure currents and water temperatures, and this is very important today because of climate change issues. We wanted to test the concept of a living lab for the humanities and the social sciences. So study more what goes on in the mind of sailors and in the mind of people who are on a boat and have to cooperate in order to face the challenges of the open seas. Our is a linear operation. We do not have a huge storage space because we don't have the need for samples, for keeping samples. We don't have the need for big refrigerators. And we are sailing on a relatively small area in the Mediterranean, not in the oceans. But of course, the project is scalable, and we hope to prove by this experience that the concept works. So for this testing phase, we have some pilot projects. The main one is related to the activity of drawing. We are rehearsing the study of dessinateurs de marine, who were on sailboats of the French Navy until the end of the last century, making sketches of onboard situations and of situations ashore. We also have a study on disorientation, which is my main research topic right now. We are interested in the way in which sailor can use distant landmarks and elements of the landscape, permanent elements of the landscape, but also transient elements of the landscape to negotiate the second-by-second navigation. Its main feature is that it is a complex set of constraints. Everything on a sailboat has a name, everything has a role, and people's gestures plan in advance. The open seas are a demanding environment, and many unforeseen circumstances happen, so you have to be ready for those circumstances. And typical navigation is long periods of inactivity followed by sudden bursts of intense exchanges and shouting, complicated operations that have to be performed in an ordered way. Thereby, sailors train a lot and prepare a lot of routines that they can execute. But the main point is that a sailboat is a microcosm, it's a human microcosm. Some of us would like to call it a kind of a relational accelerator. It's a place in which human relations are accelerated, speeded up. People board on a sailboat without knowing each other in some cases, so they have to very quickly align to each other, and the captain is there not only to impart orders to the crew, but also to make sure that there is synchronization between them. So at the beginning of each navigation, there is a brief and possibly a checklist of things to be done, whose main use is to synchronize people's abilities, intentions, and skills so that the navigation will be possible. Our project also had a poem in residence who produced haikus during our journey, and the poems which were produced were simple sketches of salient moments of the navigation, and they had the interesting effect of making us think about what we were doing. So the contribution of art is not just expressive, it's not just a way to express feelings about what happens, but here it was a way for us to gain a new viewpoint on our activities, a very concise viewpoint which could allow us to see better what we were doing.
Quindi esce questo ansia del fare, per anticipazione partono le mani.
clouds move fast. We can make them move even faster if we want to see the higher order properties of the movement of clouds. So we had an acceleration of time-lapse in a number of conditions. In some cases, we see clouds reaching the boat, as when we sail from Ponza to Ventotene. We see that we are moving, but we also see that clouds are faster than us. In other cases, we are motoring, and so we are going towards clouds that are moving towards us, and we experience an acceleration of our movement. More complex dynamics in clouds are related to stormy weather conditions. When we were moored in Ventotene, we set a time lapse for an entire day, and we had 3 storms over us, and it is possible to see the dynamics of boats during a storm, of clouds. The sky is all of a sudden overcast and then it's clear again.
Va bene così. No, vabbè, va bene così, dai.
So we embarked a number of pieces of equipment, GoPro, cameras. We tried eye tracker, but the software was not very well adjusted, so we weren't able to use it because of the contrast. And so this is what happens when you're sailing. You always have to rely on some kind of B plan. B plan here was to, instead of having him carrying the eye tracker, to tell us what he was looking at. Of course, this is not a substitute for the actual recording of eye movement activity, which is a better indicator of the deployment of attention to visual landmarks. But still is a good surrogate, and it gives us an indication of what it is that the pilot is looking at.
Ventotene, Scoglio Botte, base Genoa.
So the pilot is simply telling us out loud: island, cloud, base of sail, wind instrument, all the things that are worth his or her attention.
Cresta onde lontane a dritta. Cresta onde sottovento. Strumento del vento. Punto di Bugna. Scoglio Botte.
Primitive navigation doesn't use instruments, so you have to rely on features of the environment, on distant landmarks. But when you project a long route, hundreds of miles, you have to be able to keep your route, and for this you have to rely on some stable features of environment or on regular features of environment, and these are, for the ancient navigators, the sun and the stars, and possibly the wind. If the wind blows in always the same direction, it's possible to try to keep a constant angle to the wind. Navigation is so crucial for mankind, has been so crucial, and not getting lost has been so crucial that so many instruments have been invented to compensate for the loss of landmarks when one navigates. And the compass is the main instrument, and the second main instrument is the map. The map is a summary of observations made by sailors, navigators around the world in centuries, and all this knowledge is now packed into a spatial format that is conducive to making inferences about what comes next once you got to a certain point. And the other important point about navigation is to be able to make your point, to know where you are, to determine, to dead reckon your position and to plan, to predict the route based on what you did and where you are. And for this, there are many other instruments, the compass, of course, but also the sextant. And all these have been replaced today by the GPS technology, which is a modulation of the electromagnetic field and actually is a construction of a second physical environment, which is what the GPS instrument looks at. And the important thing about the GPS is that it allows you not to make computations about spatial navigation. So the system does it for you, independent of you. Without your contribution, you just have to input your location or just tell you where you want to go, and location is inputted by the GPS system, and then it finds a route for you. So a consequence of this is that we are no longer looking anymore at the environment. If you use a map, you have to look at the environment. The environment is what tells you where you are on the map, and the map is what tells you where you are on the environment. And you can only find your position on the map if you look at the environment around you yourself. And this is no longer what happens with the GPS. You don't have to look at the environment anymore. Thereby, you're not looking at the environment at all. And this is an interesting consequence, even stronger, in my opinion, than the consequence of losing our orientational abilities because we are delegating navigational computations to the system. So at some point, we document what happens when we come close to our anchor place. The pilot frantically looks into the portolan, which is a description of different ports, and gets some information about soundings, about the currents, the best way to approach, the configuration of the land around, the presence of hidden obstacles. The operation is made well in advance relative to coming to the anchoring place. On a large sailboat, the distance between different members of the crew might be important. So as communication is difficult, technology is sometimes here to help out. This is one of the reasons why we are also exploring this possibility of redundant information channels. Voice by shouting, voice over walkie-talkie, but also gestures for communication when neither system is working. One of the secrets of the success of human operations in general is redundancy. Redundancy is built in our biology, so it is also a key value in our social practices. We want to be redundant because channels can simply go bust. Biology is redundant. We have two eyes, we have two hands, and we have many ways to judge distance by sight, maybe 15 different ways. And this is good because one of these channels can simply go bust, and then we have to rely on backup channels. There is a sequence in which we want to show the potentialities of this recording apparatus. So in post-production, we marked elements which are important for visual navigation, an element which gives us the reference on the boat and the cloud, the tip of a cloud, and a distant island. These are not elements which are seen by the pilot because the pilot's face is captured by the camera, but they give an indication of the range of movement which is admissible in navigation. So the pilot here is making a mistake, is not anticipating the change of direction when surfing the wave, and you can see in the relative distances of the three spots that the mistake is corrected. Drawing on a boat is an activity which is performed in complex conditions, not only because of the movement of the boat, but because of the presence of other people, because of the decisions of the captain. So we want to document this complexity in a long sequence of about 30 minutes when we are leaving Ventotene for the mainland. And Simonetta Capecchi is coping with the movement and the captain's decisions and the people talking to her. There is a double viewpoint, her viewpoint with a head-mounted camera, and the viewpoint on the drawing, so we can see the sketch growing over time. Drawing is a very ancient activity, is one of the oldest art forms, and it's also very stable over the ages. There is very little improvement in the drawing techniques because drawing basically taps into very deep resources of the visual system. So it's a very convenient way to represent with just lines the visible profile, the visible outline of an object. This allows the draftsman to do sketches in a very economic and quick way. Sketches which have very strong representational content. That means it's very easy for the viewer to extract the relevant information from the sketch. So before photographs, drawing was the fastest, most convenient way to make a representation of reality, much faster than painting, of course, much faster than sculpture. And this is the reason of its success. And this explains why there were draftsmen for centuries on board to document landscapes, people, cultures, episodes, incidents of the navigation. Drawing has also a cognitive interest because it's a strong modulator of attention. One of the reasons why it is important today to have sketching in architectural faculties and not only CAD, computer-assisted design projects, is that by drawing, the person who draws modulates his or her attention and pays more attention to details in the environment. And this is also one of the essential features of navigation, especially of pre-instrumental navigation. By navigating in sailing, there is a constant observation of the environment, which is modulated by the activity. So drawing and navigation are, so to speak, are a kind of marriage in heaven. The two activities for someone interested in cognitive science are extremely powerful resources for understanding what goes on when we observe things around us. The drawing activity is made in the moment and it is very quick, but can it be as quick as the movement of a boat? The boat is not moving very fast, so change in perspective is relatively slow, and actually some change in perspective could be useful for the draftsman to get some details which would otherwise escape. So at some point, the living Ventotene, we have our draftswoman draw a landscape of the island as we are sailing away, and we have a double view, her subjective view with a GoPro mounted on her head, and the view from above documenting the progress of the drawing. And as you can see, it is a complex task and it requires a lot of speed and dexterity, but in the end it is possible to draw complex landscapes in difficult conditions, a moving sailboat, moving and oscillating sailboat, in order to get a documentation of a place visited by the ships during their navigations. Sailor and draftsman have something in common when it comes to clouds. The observation of clouds is the observation of something that may be used as a distant landmark only for a limited time of observation, and also the drawing of clouds is something that should be done relatively quickly because clouds simply vanish. So this is a quote by Ruskin, who's writing on Turner, and Simonetta Capecchi has given us access to this quote. Other great men color clouds beautifully, none but either Turner drew them truly, this power coming from his constant habit of drawing skies, like everything else, with a pencil point. So Ruskin describes the activity of drawing clouds, and he says, well, if you can draw a single cloud, but it's very complicated to draw the entire sky, because as you finish the cloud, the rest of the sky has changed. And he says the only way to do this is to use a pencil and sketch very quickly. So one of the advantages of sketches, of drawing, of line drawing, is, one more time, that it allows quick rendering of the scene. Now, this is probably one of the reasons why Dessinateur de bord, Dessinateur de marine, survived the birth and rise of photographs. Photography requires, at the beginning, long time exposures which are simply incompatible with the movements of the boat. In order to accomplish this project, we use a lot of footage, video footage, and we do a number of post-production work, but also we record scenes at accelerated speed in time-lapse in order to show some of the dynamics that concern the relationship between the sailor and his or her environment. Deployment of attention is a key factor in navigation. Navigation is an extremely demanding activity in terms of attention. And here we have a sequence in which we have a plan on the captain, pilot, as he maneuvers to moor the boat in Ventotene. So, very windy conditions, narrow spaces, and a number of unexpected events. Difficult to anticipate. For instance, there is a sailing club with boats that all of a sudden cross the path of a boat. And so this recording isolates the face of the captain in order to show how many elements are taken into account when performing this maneuver. The maneuver is actually turning the boat and mooring it as it turns. And again, you can see the kind of things that happen. There is a lot of preparation for the maneuver, and the mooring is a few seconds, and many things happen. There is a potential accident, a potential collision with a nearby boat because of the wind, and the crew has to immediately react. So, one of the instruments we are using here is the time-lapse. A time-lapse movie has the property of accelerating and making visible things which are not visible to the unassisted eye. They are like a kind of a telescope that allow you to see things which are too slow to be seen. And viewing a time lapse, you can detect some patterns which are not possible to detect with the naked eye, with the unassisted eye. The accelerations of a time lapse are also very powerful in showing social dynamics. We recorded a dinner, and you do not know exactly what happens during a dinner. You know that people are talking and eating, but some of the exchanges, some of the conversational terms, some of the gestures, social roles, who's having a conversation, who's doing things for whom, are very clear once you access them at the speed which is possible via the time lapse. There is a humoristic aspect to this kind of accelerated activity. Some of the manners of people become very evident. For instance, I hold my chin all the time. But over and above the funny aspects of this, you can really see some islands of stability, some islands of turbulence in the behavior, which means some higher order properties of the social behavior. Next project, we would like to develop a project about the use of gestures teaching sailing maneuvers. And another project is the use of gestures of a code for communicating orders. When you sail, the complex situations in which the maneuver accelerates are always noisy, and the channels are always difficult to decode. So it is important in some cases to have redundancy, that is to add gestures to voice. Voice maybe is not possible to hear because of wind, because of the noise of the engine, because of the distance between people. And it would be useful to have a code that tells you which kind of maneuver you should do. Ours was a pilot project. We wanted to show that a certain way to use a boat and to sail with a certain research projects is possible. As we said, there is a lot of research which is done on vessels, which is more related to physical or biological properties of the sea. Here we were interested more in possibilities of documenting the human aspects of being at sea by studying interactions of people on a boat, by studying the way in which people interact with the boat and with the sea. People have been at sea for thousands of years, but the sea is always new, and every time you go at sea, it is a new experience. So we want to learn about this experience. We want to understand what it is for the human mind to be confronted with this element.